This is First Coast News at 5.
He's probably the greatest risk of all four right now. And to tell you the truth, we don't know.
Found alive and rescued, 3 crew members now back on solid ground a day after a cargo ship capsizes off the coast of Georgia.
You kept hearing things fall in the ship and you weren't sure if those were people or if they were cars.
Tapping on metal leads to survivors missing since Sunday.
I know they looked super happy to be outside of that space and coming down onto the tugboat.
Tonight, live team coverage of the Coast Guard rescue.
After being trapped on a capsized cargo ship for more than 30 hours, 3 crew members have this afternoon been safely rescued. Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Heather Crawford, broadcasting live tonight from the St. Simons Island Pier. Now you can see that massive cargo ship right behind me. It's loaded with more than 4,000 cars, and right now tugboats are helping to keep it stable. Now it began listing around 2 o'clock Sunday morning as it was leaving port with 24 crew members on board. Now 20 of them were initially airlifted and rescued to safety, but a fire forced rescuers to pull back yesterday. Now tonight we know that 1 lone crew member is still on board that ship trapped, and his rescue, the Coast Guard says, is going to be the riskiest. Now here is what else we know at this hour. That ship, the Golden Ray, remains on its side in the St. Simons Sound. Right now, the NTSB is leading the investigation into what caused this massive ship to capsize. And for the time being, all vessel traffic through the Port of Brunswick remains suspended. Now, this capsized ship has drawn a huge crowd. There are people you can see behind me on the pier all around this area have come here to see this. This is a sight you normally don't see, and the ship is so close to shore. So all day long, people have been here. I'm right next to international media that is here covering this story. And so the capsized ship also drew the attention of maritime attorney Rod Sullivan. He's been in the maritime industry for 40 plus years. He says he's never personally seen a sight like this. And while he says it's not uncommon for ships to run aground, it is highly unusual for them to be capsized. And he talked about those 4 crew members who were trapped on the ship for more than 40 hours. He's optimistic tonight that that 4th crew member will be rescued safely. Take a listen.
I mean, I think those 4 Korean seamen are heroes. But I mean, they volunteered to go into the hold of a ship when it was rolling over on its side so they could save the ship and save their fellow crew members. And they stayed till the very last minute. To me, that's a heroic act.
So that 4th crew member who is trapped right now, the Coast Guard says, is behind glass. In some sort of room that they have not been able to get to him. Earlier today, they were able to drill 3-inch holes to get food and water and medical supplies to those 3 crew members who were later rescued. But now that 1 crew member has been on there for more than 30 hours. So we are going to continue to follow the Coast Guard's operation to get him off the ship safely. Continuing our live team coverage now is my colleague Troy Kless. And Troy, as they are carefully strategizing how to rescue this man, there's also environmental concerns tonight.
That's right, Heather. Earlier tonight, we could see booms were down in the area to contain any oil that may have been on the surface. Now, the Altamaha Riverkeeper did confirm they did find additional booms containing oil when they returned to their dock at the Sidney Lanier Bridge. Now, some bystanders are optimistic that the environment will be okay, despite the fact that this ship likely has thousands of gallons of fuel on board. For St. Simons residents, the sight of a cargo ship on its side is unprecedented. But Allison Tucker says a similar incident happened long ago.
Back in 1973, there was a big ship barge that hit the Sidney Lanier Bridge over there.
Tucker has lived here for decades and has painted St. Simons shores many times.
I have such a love for this place, and anything that affects this place touches my heart.
The Altamaha Riverkeeper also cares for the area, and so far the environmental impacts have been contained thanks to large booms keeping oil contained.
We're sitting actually pretty good with just a small leak that is mostly contained from what we can tell. The booms have been deployed. The booms are a barrier that sits on the water and actually will contain any floating oil. That's the biggest environmental concern, is the oil besides gas.
Susan Inman says the Riverkeeper is getting a closer look by boat. The smell and sometimes the color of the water can be an indicator of pollution.
It is a priority, but the top priority is to get the 4 safely out.
Tucker is also praying for the safety of those men.
It's been such a challenge to get those men out of there.
The riverkeeper also did confirm that they have found oil at sites and sheen at some sites like the Morningstar marinas. Now, they did also say that the changing tides could make these impacts harder to track. Live on the St. Simons Island Pier, Troy Kless, First Coast News, on your side.
Something we will all be keeping a very close eye on. Troy, thanks so much. So here's what we know about those 3 crew members rescued this afternoon from the ship behind me. The Coast Guard says that they are in relatively good condition. Actually, they were able to help themselves onto a tugboat. They are now being taken to be medically evaluated. But again, at this hour, 1 crew member still trapped on that ship. Strategizing right now, the Coast Guard is on how to get him safely off the ship. We're going to stay out here. We'll continue to cover this minute by minute on firstcoastnews.com and on the First Coast News app. And coming up tonight, Jeannie, at 5:30, we're going to have more on the rescue efforts. Back to you.
There are 1 person still trapped inside of an engineering control room after a cargo ship overturned in St. Simons Sound.
The Coast Guard landed on top of the overturned ship to rescue 3 of the trapped crew members earlier today. They rescued these crew members from a really small hole, just 2 by 3 feet. That was it. It was created by the rescue operators.
And our Heather Crawford is in St. Simons right now with a first-hand look at the rescue efforts underway. Heather.
Well, Anthony, an incredibly meticulous rescue operation unfolded here right near the St. Simons Island Pier this afternoon. Dozens of people have been here all day long just watching this unfold. You can see that massive cargo ship still on its side in the water, the St. Simons Sound right behind me. Now, today we have seen those helicopters landing on and off on the ship, but the Coast Guard says the 3 crew members who were rescued today were able themselves to get onto a tugboat to then make it to safety. And the good news tonight, the good news is that the Coast Guard says those 3 crew members are said to be in relatively good condition. They're now being checked out at the hospital. And so the focus right now shifts to that lone crew member inside this capsized boat. He's been there for more than 30 hours now. The boat started listing around 2 o'clock Sunday morning. He's been without food. He's been without water, relatively probably not any light, and it has been hot outside and no doubt inside that ship. Jocelyn Howard is joining us live now to continue our team coverage with more on the rescue efforts to get him off the ship. Jocelyn?
That's right. They say those 3 crew members are actually in pretty good condition for what they had to endure. And talking about how hot it is in there, they say right now it's even hotter in there than it is out here, which could be well over 100 degrees. Now, in order to find these crew members, the Coast Guard says they were strategically knocking. The crew members were strategically knocking. Now, that's important to remember because debris is also making noise as it's falling from the ship, as it's falling within the ship. And they knocked in a constant pattern to be noticed. And then once rescue teams found that location, they drilled many holes. They were all 3 inches apart until they could connect those dots eventually and make that space for them to come out. Like you said, it was 2 feet by 3 feet. And from there, they were lowered and taken to the ambulances to be treated.
At least 2 were very ambulatory, able to get themselves out. And then the 3rd one, I don't have all the information on, but I hate to speculate. But they were subject to some pretty tough conditions over the last day and a half.
Now, there is still that last member on board, like we've said, and that crew member is behind a glass wall. They say he is in a control room and he was not able to get that food and water that was delivered to the previous crew members, 3 of them that were in there today. But we will keep you updated here on First Coast News about that last crew member. They say there's no telling of when he or she may come out. Reporting from St. Simons Island, Jocelyn Howard, First Coast News on your side.
Jocelyn, thank you. And the Coast Guard says getting him out will be the riskiest of the rescue efforts. Now, just a little while ago, I retweeted the Coast Guard. They posted some pictures of those 3 crew members who were rescued today. Just a big smile on their faces, no doubt relieved to be off that ship. As for what caused this ship to capsize, that we do not know at this hour, but the NTSB is leading the investigation and trying to determine the cause. And coming up tonight at 6 o'clock, we're going to be talking more about the environmental concerns surrounding this capsized ship, because keep in mind, there are more than 4,000 cars on board right now. So a lot of attention on the environment, as well as that lone crew member who they are going to try and get off. That is the latest from the St. Simons Island Pier. I'm Heather Crawford. We'll send it back into you.
But let's begin with First Coast News anchor Heather Crawford.
Jeannie, what great news as we come on air at 6 o'clock here at the St. Simons Island Pier. That massive cargo ship, you see it right behind me. The good news tonight, all 4 crew members have now been rescued and they are all safe. The Coast Guard said earlier this afternoon that the rescue of that final lone crew member who was on board was going to be the riskiest. We've not seen any helicopters land on the ship, so presumably he, like the other 3 rescued today, probably was taken to safety on a tugboat and then will be taken to be medically evaluated. Now, the detention, according to the Coast Guard, now shift to how they're going to right this ship and also those environmental concerns, because keep in mind, this massive cargo ship is packed full of more than 4,000 cars. And so there's a lot of concern about the environment, about the water around where this ship capsized early Sunday morning around 2 a.m. Now, we spoke to Rod Sullivan. He's a Jacksonville maritime attorney who was out here today saying in his 40 years career, he's never actually witnessed a capsized ship. He says it's very uncommon, but he says the company that owns this cargo ship, the Golden Ray, has brought in one of the top experts in the world when it comes to marine oil pollution prevention. Take a listen.
There is no oil leaking from that ship. There was a little bit of gasoline, but nothing significant. And there's no reason when they right this ship that any more oil should go into the water. So I don't think that from an environmental perspective, this is a hazardous situation as it sits right now.
Okay, and I understand we have some video to show you of that 4th crew member, the last one on board, being rescued just within the past few minutes. A lot of elation, excitement, happiness here to know that all of these crew members, initially there were 24 on board, are now all safe and sound tonight. We're going to go now over to my colleague Jocelyn Howard, who is here at the pier tonight with me. And Jocelyn, you have more now on just the meticulous rescue operations the Coast Guard and the salvage response teams went through to get these 4 men to safety.
That's right, and that last crew member unfortunately had some very different conditions than those other 3 that were saved earlier. This last crew member was obviously by themselves. He didn't have anybody else to lean on. Also, those other crew members were able to get that water and that food that was dropped down by the Coast Guard earlier today, and that other crew member that just got saved, thank goodness, did not have that earlier today, and they were trapped for well over 30 hours.
It was outstanding. When I heard the news this morning that we had tapbacks throughout the night, I think that really motivated the team here from the Defiant Marine, who was leading some of the groups on board, as well as the team from Vertical Safety and Rescue. Those guys were motivated this morning.
Now, we feel how hot it is out here, and I heard Lauren say earlier that the highest real feel out here was 104 today. The Coast Guard estimated that on the inside, it could have felt over 120 to these crew members. So thank goodness they endured this. Thank goodness that they were able to get out, and they are true troopers tonight. We will keep you updated here on First Coast News and on firstcoastnews.com on the crew members' just their conditions tonight as they recover from this. Reporting from St. Simons Island, Jocelyn Howard, First Coast News, on your side.
Jocelyn, such good news to share tonight that all 4 crew members are now off the ship and they are safe. So the attention really now shifts to the environmental protection, environmental concerns here in St. Simons, Georgia. And Troy Kless has been speaking with the Riverkeeper. He joins us now, continuing our team coverage. Troy?
That's right, Heather. The Riverkeeper says that things could have been much worse, honestly. Now, what you're about to see in this story is pictures of booms that were used, and they were saturated with oil, so they were taken out of the water so new ones could be put in and soak up any leftover contaminants. Susan Inman says this is something many haven't seen before. She's not sure what could have caused this to happen, but so far only a small leak was detected, which Inman says is a good thing.
One thing to remember about this ship, it was leaving port with a full cargo of cars, which have gas and oil, because they're actually driven onto these ships. And so that alone is an environmental hazard.
The ship could take 40,000 gallons of gas to move. Add that with the gas and oil of the cars that were on board, Inman says it could have been disastrous. But with floating barriers deployed, that will contain most of the oil on the surface of the water. Meanwhile, the riverkeeper can monitor the water's quality with more tests by sight and smell.
A lot of your contaminants don't have a color, and so you can usually go by smell, and that can lead to an investigation right there. But also color. Color a lot of times may not have a smell, but if you change the color of the water, that's another violation, and therefore it can be acted upon. So those are two main things we look for.
The riverkeeper says that they are going to continue to monitor changes, but they urge community members, if they see something like oil sheen or if something smells like oil, they can report it to their local authorities. We're live on St. Simon's Island. Troy Kless, First Coast News, on your side.
Troy, thank you. So the Coast Guard saying at this hour, the attention now focuses to environmental protection, removing this vessel and resuming vessel commerce in the port and in the channel behind me. The good news, though, all 4 crew members have been taken off the ship. They are safe and said to be in relatively good condition. You can stay up to date on the latest on this story on firstcoastnews.com and on our app. And we're going to have more coverage of this capsized ship still in the water on its side behind me coming up tonight at 7 and 11. We're live at the St. Simon's Island Pier. I'm Heather Crawford, First Coast News, on your side. Well, a big crowd gathering out here at the St. Simon's Island Pier tonight, watching the massive cargo ship as that 4th and final crew member was rescued just before 6 o'clock this evening. So now everyone who was on board that ship when it capsized early Sunday morning is safe and is accounted for. That is some very good news at this hour. Now, those 4 crew members rescued today were trapped on the capsized ship for more than 30 hours without food and water in very hot conditions. Now, this massive cargo ship is also carrying more than 4,000 cars, and it is still at this hour on its side in the St. Simon's Sound. And so now the attention shifts to the environment and environmental concerns. We spoke to Rod Sullivan, a Jacksonville maritime attorney who was out here today. He says the company that owns the Golden Ray ship has brought in one of the top experts in the world on marine oil pollution prevention. Take a listen.
There is no oil leaking from that ship. There was a little bit of gasoline, but nothing significant. And there's no reason when they write this ship that any more oil should go into the water. So I don't think that from an environmental perspective, this is a hazardous situation as it sits right now.
Troy Kless is on your side. Speaking to the riverkeeper, he continues our team coverage now. Troy?
The Altamaha riverkeeper confirmed that there was oil found in the immediate area, but it has since been contained. Now, some bystanders are optimistic that the environment will be okay, despite what is likely thousands of gallons of fuel that is on board the ship. For St. Simon's residents, the sight of a cargo ship on its side is unprecedented. But Allison Tucker says a similar incident happened long ago.
Back in 1973, there was a big ship barge that hit the Sydney Lanier Bridge over there.
Tucker has lived here for decades and has painted St. Simon's shores many times.
I have such a love for this place, and anything that affects this place touches my heart.
The Altamaha riverkeeper also cares for the area, and so far the environmental impacts have been contained thanks to large booms keeping oil contained.
We're sitting actually pretty good with just a small leak that is mostly contained from what we can tell. The booms have been deployed. The booms are a barrier that sits on the water and actually will contain any floating oil. That's the biggest environmental concern, is the oil besides gas.
Susan Inman says the riverkeeper is getting a closer look by boat. The smell and sometimes the color of the water can be an indicator of pollution.
It is a priority, but the top priority is to get the 4 safely out.
Tucker is also praying for the safety of those men.
It's been such a challenge to get those men out of there.
The riverkeeper says they are going to continue to monitor the impacts, but the change in tide could make the impact harder to track. On the St. Simons Island Pier, Troy Kless, First Coast News, on your side.
So now the Coast Guard says the focus is on environmental protection, removing the vessel and resuming commerce. As for what caused this massive cargo ship to capsize, that is not known at this hour. The NTSB, though, is leading the investigation. And we will have more on this developing story tonight on First Coast News at 11. At the St. Simons Island Pier, I'm Heather Crawford, First Coast News, on your side.